One of the key parts to any good video is good B-roll, and your video announcements are no exception. So let's take a look at how to get it and how to use it. Hey, what's up guys? I'm Sam DeZeo, and this is Smart Design, where we focus on making church media simple for everybody. We believe that as Christians, we all have a story to tell, and media is simply just a tool to help tell that story effectively. So if you are a church leader using media, go ahead and smash that like button and hit subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. This episode is brought to you by the 7 must-haves in your video announcements. Use this checklist to make sure you don't miss a critical piece in your announcements and ensure you inspire your congregation to get involved at your church. Today we are talking about B-roll. So before we even talk about B-roll, we got to answer the question, what is B-roll? So B-roll is the footage that goes on top of the person talking in a video. So typically what this is used for is to push the story forward or just to give more context. They can be used as transitional shots or really just to help drive the story forward. No pun intended. And one of the big advantages to B-roll too is it captures and it holds the audience's attention. Well, you know that I make YouTube videos. Some of the trends that I've seen in my videos is the more B-roll that I add, the longer people watch, the more retention on those videos that I have. So, first things first, as I'm gearing up for my shoot, I want to make sure that I put on my wide angle lens. So for me in this case, I have the Tokina 11 to 16 millimeter, and I did a whole review about that if you want to check that video out. But for your case, you might not have a dedicated wide angle lens like that. You might just have the kit lens, or you might even be using a phone. So whatever you have, just make sure you're at the widest setting. But for me, I'm going to be using my dedicated wide angle lens, and we're going to start with that lens. So the first thing that I'm going to want to do is get some establishing shots before I even go in the church. And that's why we are using this lens in particular first, because one, it's great for things like establishing shots, and you're able to get those right when you show up to the location that you're shooting. And you can get those shots out of the way and you're done with them, and then you can move on to your other lenses. Because what you'll find when you're creating these video announcement B-roll is that when you're shooting events, the event isn't going to wait for you. The event's going to happen whether you are there or not, so time is of the essence. You have to have good time management. So what I do to help that is I get there early, I use my wide angle lens to get my establishing shots inside and outside, and then once I'm done with those, I pop on my other lenses. And I'll get multiple shots because, you know, the more the better. And then I'll go inside with my wide angle lens and get some shots of the people talking and just the interior of the church, and just so we really have a good understanding of where we are and what it looks like. All right, tip number 2. Tip number 2 is actually pretty simple, but the reality is I suck at this, and I'm really trying to get better about this, so I have to preach this to you because I kick myself in the butt so many times because of this. Make sure you shoot more than you think you're gonna need. And by that, I mean actually a couple different things. One, like when I did outside, I got a couple different shots of the outside. In reality, I'm probably only going to use one of those shots. But what I would hate to do is go into editing and say, man, I wish I had one more good shot of the outside of the church. But one other thing that you can do to make sure that you shoot more than you need is when you're recording something, let it roll for 5, maybe even 10 seconds longer than you think that you're actually going to use. And for some people that might be like self-explanatory, and it probably is to me too, but I don't know why I'm so bad at doing that. When I'm shooting something, I'm almost editing in my mind as I'm doing it, and I'm shooting and then I stop recording. And I think, honestly, the reason I do that is because I'm thinking, well, that's all the footage I need for that edit, and I'll move on to the next thing. But I end up kicking myself in editing all the time because I'm like, man, I needed like 1 second more of that clip. So this big tip to you is really just don't edit while you're shooting. And save that step for later. Just get the good shots now and then worry about cutting things out. For me, what I find is I always don't have enough footage. I never find myself in the case where I'm like, oh, I have too much good footage. Like that's never really the problem. Okay, so my next tip is to add movement to your shot. So this isn't true all the time, but 99% of the time, a shot is more interesting if there's movement added to it. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy. If you just add a simple pan or a simple tilt, that shot would be far nicer than just a static shot. And if you're looking for the right tripod to be able to do this, there's many out there that you can use, but what you want to search for is what's called a fluid head tripod. That's really what's going to give you your nice pan and your nice tilt. Now what I use is the Binro S6. And now I love that tripod, but that's not the only tripod option out there. But as long as you're searching for a fluid head tripod, any of those should work for you. So now let's talk about other ways that we can add movement to our shots in fun and creative ways. So one fun thing you can do is what's called the tripod tilt. And what that looks like is taking your tripod and putting it on 2 of the 3 legs, and then tilting into or away from the thing you're focusing on or your subject. That's a super easy way to get a nice stable shot that almost looks like you're using a dolly or a slider of some sort, but you're really just using your tripod. But again, that fluid head is the key to this trick, because as I'm pushing in with the legs of the tripod, I'm actually tilting up with the fluid head. And because it is a fluid head and it's nice and smooth, you don't even realize that a tilt is actually happening on this tripod. And one more trick is called the reverse blur. I don't know if you've ever tried to do this, but there's this effect where you start completely out of focus on something, and then you push in to get the subject or whatever it is in focus. And let me show you how to nail that every time, because before I knew this, it was so frustrating because I would overshoot it every time, and then I would have to come back, and it didn't look good. So really all you have to do is do this in reverse. So start on your subject, focus on it real nice, and then pull out so it's completely out of focus. And then when you're editing, just reverse the footage, add a speed ramp, and it looks like you nailed it every single time. One thing that's super trendy in the world of video right now is shooting in slow motion, or shooting in a higher frames per second. And now not all cameras are able to do this, so make sure that your camera is able to before you start shooting, of course. But if you are just using your phone, I recommend using something called Filmic Pro. It's just an app that you can download, and it gives you that capability to shoot in higher frames per second. And there's some advantages and some disadvantages to shooting in slow motion. First of all, the one advantage is, I mean, it kind of looks pretty cool. Whether it's someone playing an instrument or just smiling, whatever it is, a lot of times slow motion just really looks cool. But it also just gives you that ability to do a speed ramp when you're editing, so starting off really fast and then slowing down. But the big downside to doing slow motion is that you're gonna need more light. You're gonna have to shoot in a higher shutter speed, and that is going to require more light to get into your camera. But luckily in this shoot, I had a ton of light to work with, so that wasn't an issue. Alright, so we've talked a lot about the B-roll, but what about the A-roll? The stand-ups, the host, the talking in front of the camera, what about that? One way to make that super easy is with a teleprompter. And now I know what you're thinking, that's expensive. But literally a friend of mine helped me make one for $4, and I don't care if you're a church on a budget, you can afford a teleprompter for $4 from the dollar store. If you want to watch that tutorial on how to put that together, click right here. And if you want to watch the whole series on video announcements, click right here and learn everything there is to know about creating the video announcements for your church. I'll see you in the next video.